The moment you explain yourself, you lose. Not because your reasons are bad, not because they wouldn't understand, not because you owe them nothing, though you don't. You lose because the second you defend yourself, you have handed them the role of judge, and now you are performing for a verdict from people who already decided you would fail. Napoleon Hill named the fear of criticism as one of the 6 fears that quietly run a human life. And he said it costs more people their destiny than failure ever could. By the end of this, you will understand why the most powerful response to being doubted is to say nothing at all. Why silence is not weakness, but the highest form of self-control. And how to let the people who underestimate you become the fuel that builds the thing they said you couldn't. Stay with me. Because silence has rules, and getting them wrong makes you bitter instead of unstoppable. Here is what happens the moment someone doubts you. Something in your chest tightens. You feel the pull to correct them, to lay out the plan, show the evidence, make them see that they are wrong about you. It feels like standing up for yourself. It is actually the opposite. Because the instant you start explaining, 3 things happen, and none of them help you. First, you have admitted their opinion matters enough to answer. Second, you have shown them your plan, which they can now doubt in detail instead of in general. And third, you have spent the energy you needed for the work on a conversation that changes nothing. Because a person who underestimates you was never waiting for a better argument. They were waiting to be proven right. Hill understood this at the level of law. He listed the fear of criticism among the 6 basic fears, and he said something most people miss. He said this fear is largely responsible for the destruction of ambition, self-reliance, and the desire to achieve. Because the moment a person becomes afraid of what others will say, they begin shrinking their own dreams to fit inside what the crowd will approve. The need to be understood is a leash, and whoever holds your need for approval holds you. And notice how early this fear is installed. As a child, you were praised for pleasing and corrected for disappointing. And somewhere along the way, the approval of others stopped being pleasant and became necessary. You learned to check faces before you moved. Most adults are still doing it, unconsciously, every day. Shrinking a decision here, softening an ambition there, all to avoid a criticism that may never even come. Hill called this living as a slave to opinion, and he meant it literally. The slave is the one whose behavior is controlled by someone else. And if your behavior bends around what others might say, you are not as free as you think. So here is the first reframe, and it is uncomfortable. The people underestimating you are not the problem. Your need to correct them is. The work does not require their belief. It never did. It requires only that you stop spending yourself trying to buy it. Let me tell you about a pattern Hill noticed in the successful men he studied for 20 years. Almost none of them were loud about their plans. Andrew Carnegie did not announce what he was building. The most effective people Hill interviewed shared a strange trait. They were quiet in exactly the moments other people would have been shouting. When they were doubted, they did not argue. When they were mocked, they did not defend. They simply went quiet and went to work, and let the result arrive years later like a door closing on the argument. And Hill observed something about how that silence landed on other people. It unsettled them. A person who argues back is predictable. You can push against them. But a person who hears the doubt, says nothing, and calmly continues, gives the doubter nothing to grip. There is no fight to win, because there is no fight. The silence itself communicates a certainty that words never could, because words can be faked and silence under pressure cannot. Think about it from the other side. Who seems more dangerous to you? The person who loudly insists they will succeed, or the person who hears you doubt them, smiles slightly, and says nothing? The first one you dismiss. The second one you quietly start to worry about. That is the power you are giving away every time you explain yourself. You are trading the unsettling silence of the certain for the noisy defense of the insecure. And the people underestimating you can smell the difference. There is a deeper reason this works, and Hill touched it in Outwitting the Devil. He said most people are drifters, carried along by whatever opinion is loudest around them, and that a drifter is instantly recognizable because he cannot tolerate silence, his own or anyone else's. He fills every gap with explanation, justification, noise, because silence forces him to sit with himself, and he has spent his whole life avoiding exactly that. So when you can sit in silence under pressure and not flinch, you are signaling that you are not a drifter, that there is a self in there solid enough to rest on. People feel that even when they cannot name it, and it changes how they treat you before you have said a word. Stay with me, because I am about to show you the 4 rules of using silence as a weapon. And the 4th one is the difference between silence that builds you and silence that just makes you resentful and alone. Here is the mistake people make when they hear all this. They confuse silence with withdrawal. They stop explaining, but they also curl inward. They go quiet on the outside and loud on the inside, replaying the doubt, rehearsing the comeback, letting resentment run in a loop. That is not the silence Hill is describing. That is just the argument moved indoors, and it poisons you slower but deeper. Real silence is not the absence of a response. It is the redirection of it. You take every ounce of energy you would have spent defending yourself, and you pour it into the only thing that ever actually answers a doubter, which is the result. Hill built an entire principle around this in the Law of Success. He called it doing more than you are paid for and going the extra mile. And underneath the phrasing is exactly this idea. Do not tell them they are wrong. Build the thing that makes the question embarrassing to have asked. Let the work be the argument. It is the only argument that cannot be rebutted, because it is not a claim. It is a fact standing in the room. So silence is not you going quiet and shrinking. It is you going quiet and expanding in the dark, where they cannot watch and cannot interrupt, until the day the result speaks at a volume you could never have reached with your voice. And there is a mercy in this you will not expect. When you stop explaining, you also stop absorbing. Every time you defended yourself, you had to first take the doubt in, hold it, and turn it over to craft a response. Silence lets it pass through you untouched. The doubt arrives, finds no door, and leaves. You would be amazed how much lighter you feel the first week you stop letting other people's low opinions rent space in your head rent-free. That is the discipline. Now here are the rules that make it work. Rule 1. Never announce. Demonstrate. The moment you announce a plan, you get a small hit of satisfaction, the feeling of having already done it. Hill warned that this feeling actually drains the drive to do the real thing, because the mind confuses the announcement for the achievement. Worse, you have now invited an audience to your struggle. Keep the plan close. Let the finished thing be the announcement. Rule 2. Let them keep their low opinion. This one is counterintuitive. When someone underestimates you, do not correct it. A low estimate is an advantage. They will not guard against you, will not compete seriously, will not see it coming. Hill studied men who used being underestimated as camouflage. The world's expectation of your failure is the cover under which you build. Do not trade that cover for the cheap satisfaction of being taken seriously too early. Rule 3. Answer only with results, and only once. When the result finally arrives, you do not need a speech. The result is the speech. In fact, the most powerful move is to let it land and still say nothing, because the silence after a win is louder than any victory lap. The people who doubted you will do the explaining now, to themselves, and that conversation will humble them far more than anything you could have said. Rule 4, and this is the one that protects you. Do it without contempt. This is where silence goes wrong for most people. They stay quiet, but they nurse a private hatred, and I'll show them that curdles into bitterness. And Hill was clear that a mind poisoned by resentment cannot do its best work, because the fear of criticism, left to rot, becomes the desire for revenge. And revenge is just the doubter still controlling you from the inside. So you stay silent. You let them underestimate you. You answer with results, but you release the grudge. Not for them, for you, because the goal was never to defeat them. It was to become free of needing anything from them at all, including their defeat. Never announce. Let them underestimate you. Answer once with results, and carry no contempt. That is silence as a discipline, not a sulk. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed that the people whose approval you crave the most are almost never the people whose lives you actually want? Sit with that, because it reveals what the need for approval really is. It is not a desire to be understood. It is a habit of handing strangers the authority to decide your worth. And silence, practiced over time, breaks that habit at the root. Here is what it builds in its place. First, it builds focus, because the energy that used to leak out through explaining and defending now has nowhere to go but the work. Second, it builds a strange, quiet confidence, the kind that does not need to be seen to be real, because you have proven to yourself over and over that you can sit inside doubt without collapsing into a defense. And third, it builds independence, the actual thing Hill was pointing at the whole time. The person who no longer needs to be believed in has removed the last handle by which the world could control them. There is a compounding effect here that is easy to miss. Each of these feeds the next. The focus produces better work. The better work produces results. The results quietly prove to you that you never needed the approval, and that proof deepens the independence. which frees up even more focus. It is a loop that runs in your favor, and it starts the first time you choose silence over the defense. Most people never start it because the first turn is the hardest. Sitting in doubt without answering feels unbearable exactly once, and then it gets easier every time after. Hill said, "The master of self is the master of circumstance." And there is no purer test of self-mastery than sitting across from someone who thinks less of you, feeling the full pull to correct them, and choosing, on purpose, to say nothing and let time do the talking. Every time you win that small internal battle, you get a little more free. The doubters think their low opinion is a weight on you. Used correctly, it is a gift. They handed you the one thing that forces the discipline that builds the life. They just expected you to waste it arguing. Now, silence is not a rule for every situation, and Hill was not telling you to go mute through life. So let me be precise about when silence serves you and when it does not. Stay silent when the person doubts you, when explaining would only feed the doubt, when the plan is still fragile and an audience would harm it, and when the only thing driving your urge to speak is the need to be seen as right. In all of those, silence is the move. Break the silence in 3 cases. Break it to the small circle Hill called your mastermind, the 2 or 3 people genuinely aligned with your goal, because those are not an audience. They are allies. And the plan grows stronger, spoken among them. Break it to teach, once you have the result and someone sincerely asks how, because then your words are earned and useful instead of defensive. And break it to defend someone who cannot defend themselves, because silence in the face of injustice to others is not discipline, it is cowardice. The line is simple. Silence toward the doubters and the crowd. Voice toward your allies and your responsibilities. Confuse the two, and silence becomes isolation. Keep them straight, and silence becomes power. Hill was careful about the mastermind for exactly this reason. He said, "No one ever achieved anything great alone. That behind every large success is a small circle of aligned minds pulling in one direction." So silence is not a vow of solitude. It is a filter. You go quiet toward the many so you can be fully open with the few who actually matter. The mistake is inverting it, being guarded with your allies and pouring your heart out to the crowd, which is exactly what most people do, and exactly why they feel both exposed and alone. Here is what changes when you live this way. The doubt stops hurting, not because you stopped hearing it, but because you stopped needing it to be wrong. Someone underestimates you, and where there used to be a flinch and a rush to defend, there is now just a quiet nod and a return to the work. Their opinion arrives and finds nothing to grab. You have become, in the truest sense, uncontrollable, because the handle they used to pull is gone. And the work gets better, because all the energy that used to bleed out through your need to be understood is now flowing into the only thing that ever mattered. The result builds in silence, and one day it arrives, and it is so undeniable that the people who doubted you go quiet themselves, and in that quiet you will feel something better than being proven right. You will feel that you no longer care whether you were. That is freedom, and silence is how you buy it. So here is what I want you to carry out of this. Stop explaining yourself to people who already decided. Never announce what you can demonstrate. Let them keep their low opinion, and let it be the cover you build under. Answer once, with results, and then let even the results stand in silence, and carry no contempt, because the moment you hate them, they own you again. The people underestimating you handed you a gift they did not mean to give. They gave you a reason to go quiet, get disciplined, and build. Take it, say nothing, and let the life you build be the only argument you ever make. You made it to the end of this, which means you already have the patience that silence requires. Most people don't, so use it. Everything here comes from Think and Grow Rich and the Law of Success, both linked below. And there is a new lesson on this channel every single day.